Is Gatua Bogwa. I'm from Kenya, and I'm in the US right now, where I have been since 1992. After studying in Kenya, I worked briefly for Kenya government and then a private sector in Kenya, and then returned to school in Kenya for 2 years, where I studied biointensive agriculture, which is an organic agriculture, for 2 years. And then I went to California, where I studied agroecology. I was an apprentice for 6 months, and then I decided I needed more than just a certificate, so I applied and was admitted to the University of California, Santa Cruz, where I did two first degrees, BA in environmental studies and politics. And then I went to Cornell, where I did two master's degrees. First, a Master of Professional Studies in International Agriculture and Rural Development, and then a Master of Science in Crop and Soil Sciences. And then I was later admitted to University of Wyoming, where I did my PhD in agronomy. I have been teaching for that university on a part-time basis until last year, spring. And now I'm here as a student of the Spaceship Institute. I'm going to show a presentation, PowerPoint presentation about a brief experiment I did in Kenya, an agricultural experiment, farming with Gans. Shall I start now?
Please, yes, please. Let me explain why you're showing this. As Dr. Kunta explained to us, he is a knowledge seeker in the Keshe Foundation Space Institute, started in January of this year. And in part of the teaching, he showed us his presentation. And as is agriculture today, I invited him to come and show us. And on the back of this, Dr. Mawa is going back to Kenya, sponsored and paid by the Keshe Foundation, to start the Keshe Foundation and the agriculture and the whole process in Nairobi. And I thank you for joining us, and I hope we learn a lot from you with your experience and background.
Thank you very much, Dr. Keshe.
Please go ahead.
Okay. A study was done in Kenya to assess the impact of CO2 Gans water on growth and yields of potatoes in Kenya. This experiment was done between November 2005 and February this year. What you see here is a small plot that I used for the potatoes, and this was just about 20 feet. Oh,
please make sure, let me switch off first, bring the page up, and then switch back on sharing. Stop sharing that nobody can see your system. Okay.
Is that fine?
Yes, it's perfect. Now
good, great, thank you.
Oh, sure. Okay. I don't know what's happening here. All right, there it is. So this experiment is an impact of CO2 Gans water on growth and yields of potatoes in Kenya. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. And here I am. This is the plot that I used. It's 20 feet by 15 feet. And this plot was divided into two plots, subplots, plot A and plot B. And potatoes were planted in both plots. The potato tubers was of the same variety, but what was different was the treatment. In one A plot, I used water treatment, and in B plot, I used CO2 Gans water. And Gans here is gases in nanostate. Potatoes in both plot A and plot B were soaked for 5 hours before planting. And that was the treatment, soaking in water for A and soaking in CO2 Gans water in plot B. This is how I collected the Gans. To the right here, this was how I collected CO2 Gans using simple method, mesh wire. Because I couldn't find zinc plates, I used a chicken wire, mesh wire, chicken wire, which was galvanized, and a nano-coated coil, copper coil that I made. On the left, I used a simple nail and a nano-coated copper coil for collecting CH3 Gans. And these are the Gans that I collected, some of the Gans that I collected in the beginning of the experiment, but I collected more later. And for the purposes of this experiment, only CO2 Gans they are used. This is how I soaked in plastic containers. To the left, that's water. And this is rainwater, by the way, in both cases. And to the right is CO2 Gans water. What was noticed here immediately was that the water to the left, which is dirty because the potatoes tubers had soil on them, but immediately when I put them in CO2 Gans water, the soil sank to the bottom, thus showing the efficacy of CO2 Gans for purification of water. That was a bonus for this experiment, as I was not testing the water purification. So I don't know whether you can see the titles because I can't, but this is 3 weeks after planting. There was no difference noticed between plot A and plot B. But here, this is flowering stage, and at flowering stage, what was noticed here was that, although it's not obvious in this picture, but the potatoes on the right, that is to say, the potatoes treated with Gans water, had flowers before those treated with water. And that was substantial, the difference. And this is at maturity stage. The differences in growth was now so obvious because those treated with CO2 Gans water matured early. And you can see that when potatoes mature, they wither, and to the right, they withered and dried, almost dried before those treated with water, which are still green. And at this stage, that's when they were harvested, and both plots were harvested individually. The potatoes collected, counted, and then weighed. What was noticed was that most of the plants had about 3 or 4 tubers, big ones, and then a lot of small ones, several small ones. And for the purposes of this experiment, both the big tubers and the small ones were harvested, counted, and then weighed. Results. Treatment A, that is to say, potatoes that were treated with water, 217 potatoes were harvested from that plot with a total weight of 7 kilograms. Weight per potato, when you divide the 7 kilograms divided by the potatoes, 217, you got about 32 grams, 0.03225 kilograms. That is just 32 grams. In plot treated with CO2 Gans water, 147 potatoes were harvested with a total weight of 4.75 kilograms. when you do the same maths, dividing the total weight by the number of potatoes, we got the weight of potatoes to be the same as in plot A. That is to say, about 32 grams. That was significant in that these results show that even the potatoes that matured earlier by 2 weeks had matured enough to be of the same weight. Now, potatoes treated with Gans water in plot B matured approximately 2 weeks earlier than those treated with water in plot A. There was no weight difference per potato in both plots. This is a good result as far as I'm concerned, because it shows first that maturity of plot B was faster. That means you could grow a crop in Kenya between seasons, like a short season between the main 2 seasons. You grow potatoes and harvest them in good time to plant the next crop. Also, this can be very important in terms of agriculture elsewhere in regions that have very short seasons, growing seasons or cropping seasons, especially in the Great Plains. Some of the places in the Great Plains have very short growing season because the winters go all the way sometimes to June. And to summarize, Gans water likely caused early potato maturing in plot B. And potatoes in Kenya vote yes for CO2 Gans, and I agree with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mabuga. Can you, as an economist, if you look at this, we got a picture of the potatoes next to each other. We see on the right, even though you have a smaller numbers, but you have more of the size which is usable than the small ones on the left.
Yes.
Agriculture, especially like if we see this is a trial, we can do it in a more larger scale, hopefully when you go back to Kenya. In the countries like US, in Texas, where there's the water, underground water is literally depleting and farmers are reducing production because of the water, lack of underwater tables. This can make a huge difference when you got hundreds of hectares or thousands of hectares on the cultivation. What is important, I think what we heard with Benjamin too, we got to test this to see if they have organically changed or is it still the same. And one thing we have to see is, are these potatoes were genetically modified before you planted them, or are they local potatoes?
These ones are local potatoes.
Okay. What we have seen with the systems which, let's say the seeds have been genetically modified, when you use a CO2 water Gans or the Gans directly to soak the material in, you will find out that the genetically modified structure by organizations who try to control the seeds, because the seed is not in its DNA, is on the surface of it, is new and is not part of its structure, it loses all the genetic modification. So we go back to the original seed. We go back to original growth. Well, it'll be interesting to see if you can grow genetically modified seeds, which is now prevalent everywhere, soak them in the CO2 water, and at the same time, then after an hour of soaking it, we draw them and cultivate them and see if they grow different than the others.
Oh, I'll definitely want to do that, and I look forward to doing that.
The other thing is, as you've seen, the Keshe Foundation Innovation Center will show you We are producing copper pipes, which is nano-coated outside, for watering the potatoes, for example. You're watering the agricultural land, where when the fields interact with the water, they behave like a fertilizer. So it'll be interesting to see if the growth becomes more rapid, that if you don't just water them on their own, but you use water of the what you call water energized in a way of plasmatically, and you water them, maybe we get a bigger size as potatoes, because now you're just watering in natural water. So not only we put the seeds or the potatoes originally in the water of Gans, but we water them with a system where the Gans, the energy of it becomes part of the water itself, so continues to get energized. It'll be interesting to see if the size of potatoes grows, or the season becomes shorter for the harvesting. With that, you can harvest maybe in a shorter time.
Yes, and I think that would be possibly most likely to happen because I only submerge them in water and CO2 guns on the day of planting. If I had watered them, let's say, for example, weekly, I am sure that other changes would have materialized.
Could you test that again when you go back to Kenya for us, please, or anybody else who's testing?
Oh,
Because
definitely. I'll test even harvesting period. I'll test many ways. Like I would test when, for example, bee matures. I would test both plots, and then I would have other plots in doubles. Then I would test when the others matured, like a plot, and a lot of differences. This has potential to bring out a lot of differences that are not so obvious
one
now.
thing is, yeah, carry on, please.
Say that again.
I said carry on, please. You were speaking.
No, I just finished. I say that we have seen just a few uh, results, but others can materialize when I continue with this research. And of course, I'll not only test potatoes; I'll test the other crops too.
Thank you very much. Well, it'll be interesting to see if you can. We've seen a lot of report done by our people who support the Keshe Foundation in South America, reporting the same kind of thing. It's not the first time we see it. If you go on the Spanish-speaking part of the Keshe Foundation, you'll see them. They've done tests with chilies and other things, and they reported even putting the Gans in there. Well, it'll be interesting to see if when you water these plants and you spray with the same water on the leaves, this will create an environment that the pests cannot live in it. So it can be used not only as a fertilizer, but as a pesticide too.
Yes, yes,
This is what will be fundamentally important. Even in the water, in your potatoes, if you have all sorts of worms or whatever, how much of the harvest is lost because of the what they call subterranean animals in a way eating into it. So we think from our experiments in the past that once you've done this, because I've done exactly what you've done. I've done it about 10 years ago.
okay,
And what is interesting is that um, the what I call permafrost in the countries when there is a frost, we've seen it with the Chinese in the Chinese teachings. It will make the plant even frost resistant. We know this already from Chinese group of the Keshe Foundation when they showed us the Chinese cabbages before. So I'll be interested to see if the plant gets benefited both by the watering, and the same water can be creating a new environment that does not allow or does not require use of pesticides.
yes,
What is interesting in our research in the past, and I'll see a lot of results coming from different parts of the world, is we don't go out to do what the present farming does. The present farming uses so much pesticide that it enters the cycle of the food itself in one way or another. Because when you use pesticide, it drops down on the floor when it gets washed by the rain or whatever, and it becomes part of the food chain in one way or another.
Yes.
This way, the food and the pesticide, and in a way, when you use a pesticide, you kill the animal. And it's not the way it works. You're changing the whole course. So the way we see the work of the CO2 or you can't even use CH3. You see a better result sometimes from the CH3.
Okay.
Energy conversion is much better. You change the environment that does not, animals don't want to live in it. You don't kill their life. You change the environment that the life which exists as a potato exists on its own merit. And
Yes,
this is what,
and I have seen that actually because I don't use pesticides. I grow organic, and I have seen that when there is vigorous growth, pests do not necessarily like plants that are very healthy.
yeah, it's a way when a plant creates, plants create a gravitational magnetic field which is tuned to the need of the energy of the pest. That's why they come to it. When you energize a plant, a shrub or a tree or whatever,
Yes.
you give it an environment of that it does not suit the pest. So with this technology, we don't need any pesticides. We are done with. And we need to understand that you have to keep on. It's not that you just use pesticide once and it's gone and you do it second time. With this, as you water every day, you can put the energized system with the Gans in it, that the water creates a continuous environment that is not suiting. This is important, I think, and we should consider it and monitor it, that we can change this back to the African nations where, as you said, in the countries especially like what we see in Sub-Sahara, the water is short. So if we can create by watering gas, just the same copper tubes you see behind you, copper wires, make it to copper tube that the water goes through it. And you can show us that the growth becomes to, let's say, 4 weeks, you get what you have, instead of 8 weeks or 10 weeks. In the places like we've seen with the hunger and everything else, the growth can be very short, the harvest is not lost, and you don't need that much water.